Back in the day, American wagons were meant for families, safe, practical, and built for road trips. But every so often, automakers went wild and dropped muscle car engines under the hood, turning the family hauler into a street weapon. From the outside, they looked like harmless grocery getters, but on the road, they were pure speed demons. Get ready for the 12 fastest American wagons, family sleepers. The hidden rockets disguised as family cars. Stick around till the end, and don't forget to subscribe.
The 1965 Chevrolet Impala Wagon 409 is one of those deeply fascinating machines from the mid-1960s that straddled the line between family practicality and brute force performance. By 1965, the Impala name was already firmly cemented as one of Chevrolet's crown jewels, a car synonymous with style, luxury, and power. The coupe and convertible versions had long since proven their muscle on both the street and the drag strip, thanks to the legendary 409 V8. But what fewer people remember today is that Chevrolet was bold enough to allow the 409 to be optioned in the station wagon variant. That decision created one of the great unheralded sleepers of its time, a massive family hauler that, when ordered with the right engine, could humble purpose-built performance cars in quarter-mile duels. The 409 engine itself was already part of American car folklore by the early 1960s. Introduced in 1961, it quickly became a favorite among drag racers and hot rodders, earning its reputation not just for displacement, but for its strength, rev-happy nature, and sheer ferocity. In its most potent form by 1965, the 409 produced up to 425 horsepower with dual 4-barrel carburetors, solid lifters, and a high-lift camshaft. Dropping that power plant into the long body of an Impala wagon created a contradiction on wheels. A car that looked like a suburban dad's tool for hauling groceries and kids to school, but underneath could blast through the quarter mile in the low 14-second range. A serious number in 1965, and one that rivaled or beat many dedicated muscle coupes of the era. Owners who had the courage and foresight to order a 409 Impala wagon often talk about the shock factor it produced. To the casual eye, the wagon looked harmless. With hubcaps in place, maybe a roof rack loaded up, and a tailgate ready for weekend camping trips, nobody would suspect it was hiding over 400 horses under the hood. But when stripped of its hubcaps, fitted with sticky tires, and perhaps tuned slightly, it could transform into a drag strip menace. Enthusiasts recall the priceless looks from competitors when a long, boxy station wagon lined up at the strip, only to roar off the line and leave sportier cars grasping for traction. One owner said, "There was nothing sweeter than seeing jaws drop when a wagon with a baby seat in the back just smoked a GTO off the line." The car wasn't all about sheer speed, though. Part of what made it so special was the dual personality it carried. Monday through Friday, it could be the family workhorse, comfortable seats, enormous cargo capacity, and a quiet, smooth ride at cruising speeds. But on Saturday night, with the right tires and a quick tune, it transformed into a legitimate street and strip predator. The 409's broad torque curve made it deceptively easy to drive. And even though the wagon carried more weight than its coupe counterpart, the engine's sheer grunt masked most of that. For a generation of gearheads, the 409 Impala wagon became the ultimate example of having your cake and eating it too. Power, practicality, and presence all rolled into one. Visually, the 1965 Impala carried the fresh redesign that gave it a more sculpted, modern look compared to earlier, boxier models. The wagon's long, sweeping lines, wide grille, and tasteful chrome trim gave it a dignified presence, while subtle SS-inspired cues on some builds hinted that something special lurked beneath. But perhaps its greatest strength as a sleeper was just how ordinary it could look. No spoilers, no flashy stripes, just a big family wagon ready for another trip to the drive-in or grocery store. Only the deep burble of the 409 at idle betrayed its true nature, a sound that even today sends shivers down the spine of those who grew up in the golden age of big block performance. Today, a genuine 1965 Chevrolet Impala wagon with the 409 is almost impossibly rare. The vast majority of buyers who wanted performance opted for the Cooper convertible, while wagon buyers tended to focus on utility and comfort. That means only a sliver of wagons were ever built with the big 409, and far fewer have survived intact. Collectors who stumble across one today treat it as a once-in-a-lifetime find, a rolling contradiction that represents both the practicality of family life and the unrestrained performance spirit of the muscle car boom. The 1965 Impala Wagon 409 stands as a testament to the glorious unpredictability of 1960s American performance cars. It was a car that shouldn't have existed, at least not on paper, but did because Chevrolet gave customers the freedom to mix practicality with outrageous power. In doing so, they created a rare breed of muscle machine, one that could carry 6 passengers, a load of camping gear, and still shred the quarter mile with style. It was, in every sense, the perfect drag strip sleeper, and a reminder that sometimes the most powerful cars wear the most unassuming clothes. Would you like me to create a full street racing-styled narrative for this one? Like a first-hand account of a 65 Impala 409 wagon lining up at the strip or a stoplight, and what that moment would have been like for both the driver and the surprised competitors?
The 1978 Pontiac LeMans Safari 400 4-barrel is one of those forgotten curiosities from the late 1970s, a time when the muscle car flame had dimmed but hadn't quite gone out. By 78, the performance era was supposed to be dead. Tightening emissions standards, rising insurance costs, and the looming shadow of fuel economy regulations had stripped once mighty muscle icons down to shadows of their former selves. The GTO was gone. The Firebird was under heavy restrictions, and even the Camaro Z28 was a far cry from its late 60s heyday. Yet Pontiac, ever the rebel division at GM, found a way to sneak just a little bit of that old spirit into a car no one would have expected, the Le Mans Safari station wagon. The idea sounds almost laughable at first, a family wagon in the depths of the malaise era serving as a performance car, but that's exactly what Pontiac did by offering the Safari with the 400 cubic inch V8 and a 4-barrel. In stock form, it wasn't the fire-breathing monster that the 421s and 455s of the previous decade had been, but it still made respectable horsepower and, more importantly, torque. That torque was what gave the big wagon its surprising edge, loads of low-end grunt that could push the Safari off the line with authority, even when loaded with passengers and gear. On paper, the numbers didn't look incredible. Horsepower ratings had been neutered by the switch to net measurements. But on the street, the 400 still had enough muscle to embarrass cars like the 78 Camaro Z28, especially when tuned by an owner who knew how to free it from factory restrictions. And many did exactly that. In the hands of enthusiasts, the Safari 400 became an unlikely sleeper. A freer breathing exhaust, a better ignition setup, and some carburetor tuning could quickly wake up an extra 40 to 50 horsepower, putting the wagon back into territory where it could surprise the heck out of younger drivers in late 70s performance coupes. One former owner recalled with pride, "I used to pile 6 kids in the back after practice, pull up next to some guy in a Z28 and leave him staring at my tailgate. Nobody expected a wagon to move like that." Another enthusiast remembered taking his Safari to a Friday night test and tune at the drag strip, stripping out the spare tire, dropping the rear seats flat, and running times that shocked the crowd. The beauty of the Le Mans Safari wasn't that it was the fastest thing on the road, but that it was never supposed to be fast at all, yet could hold its own against the best that late 70s muscle had to offer. Stylistically, the 1978 Safari was pure late-decade Pontiac. Squared-off lines, wide chrome bumpers, stacked headlights, and in some trims, wood grain siding that made it look every bit the suburban family hauler. Underneath, though, it shared its bones with the Le Mans Coupe, giving it a decent chassis foundation and allowing for some suspension tweaks that owners could exploit. The interior was cavernous, with space for the whole family and then some, making it the ultimate contradiction. A car that could haul half the Little League team in the back and still light up the rear tires if Dad felt like showing off on the way home.
In historical terms, the 1978 Le Mans Safari 400 is fascinating because it represents Pontiac's refusal to give up the performance mantle, even as the industry turned towards downsizing and efficiency. The fact that you could still order a big displacement V8 in a wagon in 1978 is a minor miracle. Most buyers, of course, never knew or cared. They bought Safaris for their space and comfort. But for the rare enthusiast who ticked the right option boxes, they ended up with one of the last true expressions of the muscle wagon formula. Today, these cars are almost extinct. The few that survive are often dismissed as just old wagons by casual observers, but collectors who understand their significance know better. They stand as one of the last gasps of Pontiac's glory years, a moment when the division's rebellious DNA found its way into even the most family-oriented model. And while the Le Mans Safari 400 might not have the brute force of a 1963 Catalina SD or the audacity of a 1972 Chevelle Wagon SS, it occupies a unique niche, a late 70s sleeper that proved Pontiac could still inject some fire into a decade best remembered for malaise. Would you like me to spin this into a more vivid, real-world tale? Say a Little League dad in '78 rolling up to the game in one of these, then later lining up against a Camaro at a stoplight and shocking everyone when the wagon pulls ahead? That would bring out the sleeper charm even more. The 1960 Chrysler New Yorker Town & Country 413 Cross Ram is one of the most audacious and unlikely creations of the early muscle car era. A vehicle that perfectly embodies the wild experimentation and engineering bravado of Detroit in the late 1950s and early 1960s. At first glance, it looks like a stately, finned family wagon. An elegant, luxurious machine built for suburban duty, weekend picnics, and long highway cruises with luggage piled high in the cavernous cargo bay. But beneath the elegant lines and massive chrome trim lay something so outrageous that it almost defies belief. Chrysler's legendary 413 cubic inch V8, topped with a cross-ram dual carburetor setup, pumping out an advertised 375 horsepower and enough torque to make even the heaviest full-size wagons leap forward like overgrown hot rods. The cross-ram system itself was a masterpiece of early 60s engineering bravado. Chrysler's engineers, working under the direction of the famed Ram Chargers Performance Group, devised a long branch intake manifold system where each carburetor sat atop one valve cover and fed alternating cylinders through impossibly long intake runners that crisscrossed the engine bay. The idea was to increase low and mid-range torque by improving air velocity, and the result was astonishing. These engines delivered mountains of torque right off idle, making the enormous New Yorker Town & Country feel far more responsive than its size suggested. Paired with dual 4-barrel carburetors, the system not only looked like something out of science fiction, but gave Chrysler an undeniable performance edge in the early 60s horsepower wars. Now imagine that setup inside a Town & Country wagon. You had a car that stretched over 18 feet long, wore dramatic tail fins, was trimmed in enough chrome to blind onlookers in the sun, and yet could pull quarter-mile times that embarrassed lighter cars of the same era. This was the ultimate contradiction, a machine designed for hauling groceries, camping gear, and the family dog, but also packing the heart of a drag racer. Owners from the period often recount how absurd and delightful it was to drive one. One enthusiast remembered his father's Town & Country Cross Ram saying, "We'd load up the back with bags of groceries and kids, and he'd hit the gas just to make us laugh as the tires squealed. It felt like riding a rocket in a tuxedo." Another recalled taking the family wagon out to a Friday night drag strip meet, shocking competitors when the giant finned Chrysler, complete with roof rack, thundered down the quarter mile with the authority of a dedicated performance coupe. The 1960 New Yorker Town & Country Cross Ram wasn't a cheap car, and it wasn't common. Wagons equipped with the 413 dual-quad Cross Ram were exceedingly rare, as most families were perfectly happy with the base 361 or 383 engines. Only a small number of buyers, often enthusiasts or insiders, knew to check the right boxes and unleash the full potential of the wagon body style. For those who did, the reward was a sleeper unlike any other. a car that looked like a luxury family hauler, but could produce raw performance numbers that startled the automotive world. Driving one was an unforgettable experience. The sheer size of the wagon gave it a commanding road presence, and the torsion bar suspension offered surprisingly composed handling for such a massive car. But it was the engine that defined the experience. The moment you pressed the accelerator, the cross-ram system delivered a tidal wave of torque, surging the wagon forward with a force that belied its mass. At highway speeds, it was even more impressive. Overtaking became effortless, with the long intakes perfectly tuned for mid-range punch. For the driver, it felt like piloting an unstoppable land yacht with the heart of a dragster. For passengers, it was equal parts thrilling and hilarious, as the giant family wagon could outgun sports cars while carrying 5 kids and a cooler in the back. Today, surviving examples of 1960 New Yorker town and country wagons equipped with the 413 Cross Ram are among the rarest and most coveted Mopar oddities. Collectors treasure them not only for their rarity, but for the sheer audacity of the concept. They represent an era when automakers weren't afraid to mix luxury, practicality, and wild performance in a single package. Unlike later muscle wagons, which leaned on subtlety, the Chrysler Cross Ram wagons wore their madness proudly. Tail fins soaring, chrome gleaming, and an engine bay that looked like something out of a race shop. The 1960 Chrysler New Yorker Town & Country 413 Cross Ram is more than just a car. It's a statement of its time, a bold experiment in blending family life with raw power, and a perfect symbol of Detroit's boundless optimism and engineering daring at the dawn of the muscle era. It was a rolling contradiction, yes, but also a rolling masterpiece, a machine that could pick up groceries in the afternoon and terrify stoplight challengers by evening, all while carrying itself with the grace and flamboyance of Chrysler's golden age of styling. Would you like me to build this one into a full family road trip style narrative, where I paint a scene of a 1960 family loading into their Cross Ram Town & Country only for Dad to surprise everyone with its muscle on the open highway? That could really bring the contradiction of this wagon to life. The 1977 Dodge Monaco Wagon 440 Police Interceptor is one of those extraordinary footnotes in American automotive history, a machine that existed in the strange twilight of the muscle era, when horsepower was under siege, but big block torque still roamed free for those who knew where to look. By the late 1970s, most muscle cars had been emasculated by emissions controls, low compression ratios, and insurance crackdowns. But certain fleet-only packages, often hidden in the fine print of police and government order sheets, allowed buyers to unlock real performance. Among the wildest of these was the full-size Dodge Monaco Wagon, when equipped with the mighty 440 cubic inch Police Interceptor motor. What you got was a car that, on paper, looked like the ultimate family hauler, but in reality was a highway rocket ship with pursuit-grade credentials. The 440 Police motor was no ordinary big block. Tuned for durability and high-speed performance, it came with a hotter camshaft, heavy-duty cooling, a beefed-up oiling system, stronger internals, and a 4-barrel carburetor. In full Interceptor trim, it delivered around 250 to 275 net horsepower, which may not sound enormous compared to the muscle heyday, but in practice, it was a torque monster. With over 350 pound-feet of grunt on tap, the Monaco wagon could surge from 60 to 100 miles per hour with shocking ease, often without even downshifting out of top gear. It was precisely this relentless mid-range power that made it a favorite among police fleets, highway patrols, and the few private buyers who knew how to check the right option boxes. One retired officer famously remarked, "If you had open road, nothing short of a Corvette was going to walk away from you. And in a wagon, forget it. Nobody expected that." On the road, the Monaco Wagon 440 was the definition of sleeper intimidation. Its sheer size, long body, squared-off styling, massive chrome bumpers, projected family duty rather than menace. Yet behind the wheel, it drove like a pursuit car. The torsion bar suspension, police-grade shocks, and oversized brakes gave it far more composure than a normal Monaco. And the reinforced transmission meant it could withstand hours of high-speed driving without complaint. The car's true weapon, however, was its effortless highway performance. Owners often recall the surreal feeling of pressing the throttle at 70 miles per hour and watching the speedometer sweep upward as if the car had shed its 2.5 tons of weight. One civilian owner, who had special ordered his Monaco Safari wagon with the 440 Interceptor motor, laughed when recalling his encounters with younger drivers. He said, "These kids in Camaros thought they had me. I'd roll into the gas, not even a kickdown, and watch their faces disappear in the rearview mirror. They never knew what hit them." Because of their unusual nature, most of these wagons were built in limited numbers for police departments or government fleets. Civilian buyers rarely ordered the Interceptor motor, and when they did, it was usually for towing or special use rather than drag racing. But the ones who did became legends in their own neighborhoods. Imagine Dad pulling up at a stoplight in a wood-paneled Dodge wagon, kids in the back seat, groceries rolling around in the cargo bay, and then simply leaving behind a Mustang II or Z28 without much of a downshift. It was equal parts absurd and glorious. The wagons carried an aura of authority, too. Many of them served as undercover pursuit cars, capable of blending in until the moment they roared to life with their dual exhaust bellow, a sound that struck fear in anyone foolish enough to challenge one. Today, surviving Monaco wagons with the 440 Police Interceptor option are vanishingly rare. Most led hard lives in fleet duty, covering endless highway miles at high speed, and were scrapped once their service ended. Those few that survive in private hands are coveted both by Mopar enthusiasts and collectors of obscure performance cars. They represent one of the last great moments of the big block era, a time when horsepower was being strangled on showroom floors, but still lived strong in fleet catalogs. The 1977 Dodge Monaco Wagon 440 Police Interceptor is more than just a wagon. It's a symbol of late 70s American ingenuity, a reminder that even as the muscle era waned, there were still ways to get your hands on genuine big block performance, if you knew where to look. It was a car of contradictions, a grocery getter that doubled as a pursuit vehicle, a family hauler that could chase down sports cars, a piece of suburban camouflage hiding a warrior's heart. And for those lucky enough to drive or own one, it wasn't just a car, it was a story, a legend on four wheels, and a reminder that in the strangest corners of Detroit's lineup, true muscle sometimes wore the most unexpected clothes. Would you like me to build this one into a cop chase style narrative? Something like a Monaco wagon in the hands of a state trooper barreling down the interstate at 120 miles per hour after a Corvette, showing just how insane these wagons were in action? The 1961 Plymouth Belvedere wagon with the 361 Golden Commando engine is one of those wonderful contradictions from the dawn of the muscle car era. A car that looks like it should be content hauling groceries, hardware, and half the neighborhood kids, yet possessed the kind of firepower that could shock unsuspecting challengers at a stoplight. By 1961, Plymouth was in a bit of a strange place stylistically. This was the first year of the downsized bodies that Virgil Exner had sketched in his forward-look design language, with dramatic fins, quirky proportions, and a futuristic jet-age vibe. Buyers were either charmed or confused by the styling, but for those who looked past the sheet metal and ticked the right boxes, the Belvedere wagon could become a genuine performance sleeper. At the heart of it was the 361 Golden Commando V8. This engine was part of Chrysler's B-block family, essentially the forerunner of the legendary big blocks that would dominate later in the 1960s. In Golden Commando trim, the 361 was no slouch. With dual 4-barrel carburetors, it could crank out up to 305 horsepower, an impressive figure for the early 1960s. More importantly, it had torque in spades, meaning that in a heavy car like the Belvedere wagon, it could still launch with surprising ferocity. Drop the hammer at a stoplight, and the big wagon would squirm its rear tires through first and second gear, shocking anyone who thought they were lining up against a harmless family hauler. One old drag racer recalled, "It was hilarious. Guys in 348 Chevys would laugh at the wagon, and then it would leave them behind, the kids' toys rattling around in the back." The wagon itself was enormous by modern standards, with an interior so cavernous you really could carry a washing machine, or just about anything else you could imagine without breaking a sweat. That sheer practicality made the Golden Commando wagon one of the ultimate dual-purpose machines of its day. Families could use it for errands, vacations, and carpools during the week, then head to a local drag strip on Saturday night, pop off the hubcaps, and surprise the crowd with mid-15-second passes, numbers that were impressive for a car of its size and era. The torsion bar suspension gave it decent composure on the road, and though body roll was part of the package, the raw grunt of the big 361 made up for any handling shortcomings. Styling-wise, the 1961 Plymouth Belvedere wagon was unmistakable. The car was an oddball in the Mopar lineup, wide, low, and futuristic, with thin roof pillars, canted tail fins, and a design that seemed almost European compared to its contemporaries. While some buyers didn't warm to the look at the time, today, the eccentric styling only enhances its appeal as one of the most unusual, muscle-capable wagons ever built. With the long roofline, wraparound glass, and chrome accents, it had a kind of space-age flair that made it look as though it had rolled off the set of a science fiction film. But what really cemented the legend of the 361 Golden Commando wagon were the stories. Owners loved to tell them. Stories of loading up the family for a trip to Sears to buy a new refrigerator, only to light up the rear tires on the way out of the parking lot. Stories of late-night stoplight duels where the big Plymouth wagon humbled Tri-5 Chevys or early Galaxies. Stories of the sheer absurdity of mixing massive cargo space with dual forebarrels and real performance muscle. It was the best of both worlds, one old owner quipped. I could haul lumber for a deck and still drag race the neighbor's Impala later that day. Try doing that in anything else. Today, these wagons are virtually extinct. Few people thought to preserve them since most were used up as family workhorses, often driven into the ground and scrapped when rust and wear took their toll. Those that survive are treasures, not just for their rarity, but for their role in proving that the muscle car spirit wasn't confined to coupes and convertibles. The 1961 Belvedere wagon with the Golden Commando 361 stands as a piece of living irony, a car that could carry a washing machine home from the store, and then, without skipping a beat, light up the rear tires and roar down a drag strip. It was, in every sense, a rolling contradiction, and perhaps one of the greatest examples of the muscle wagon formula ever attempted in the early 1960s. A car that dared to show the world you didn't need a coupe to have fun, and that practicality and performance could, just for a brief golden moment, coexist in one massive, finned, dual-carbureted package. Would you like me to take this one and spin it into a Saturday at the drag strip style narrative, imagining a 61 Belvedere Golden Commando wagon pulling up next to a flashy coupe and leaving it stunned? That could really bring its sleeper reputation to life.
By 1983, most people thought the muscle wagon era was long gone. The gas crunch, tightening emissions rules, and the march toward downsized, fuel-efficient cars had left behind a landscape where performance was more memory than reality. But in the middle of all this, Oldsmobile still offered something of a throwback: the custom cruiser wagon with the Olds-built 403 cubic inch V8. On paper, it wasn't earth-shattering, rated at a fairly mild 185 horsepower, but anyone who ever drove one will tell you that numbers didn't tell the whole story. What the 403 had in abundance was torque, endless low-end pulling power that made the big custom cruiser feel far more muscular than most early 80s cars had any right to. The Olds 403 itself was something of a survivor, a holdover from the late 1970s when it powered everything from Trans Ams to Delta 88s. It had a wide bore, a short stroke, and was built for torque rather than screaming revs. In the custom cruiser, that torque was perfectly matched to the wagon's mission, hauling huge loads of people and cargo effortlessly. Even when saddled with emissions-era carburation and highway-friendly gearing, the 403 still delivered the kind of grunt that could leave lighter cars embarrassed if you weren't shy about putting your foot down. Many owners remember mashing the gas on an empty two-lane road and watching the speedometer sweep past 90 without strain, the big Olds pulling like a freight train. One longtime owner recalled, "It wasn't a dragster, but if you uncorked the exhaust and did a little carb work, it turned into a whole different beast. I used to shock guys in Camaros who thought my wood-paneled wagon was a pushover." And the custom cruiser was a huge wagon. At nearly 4,700 pounds and stretching over 18 feet long, it was the definition of full size. With seating for up to 9,
acres of glass and the optional faux wood paneling along the flanks, it projected exactly the image of a family hauler. Yet under the hood lurked that big block Olds heart, a relic of the pre-oil crisis years. This mismatch of appearance and performance made the 403 Custom Cruiser one of the great sleepers of its day, especially once enthusiasts figured out how to bypass its emissions choke points. A freer-breathing exhaust, a rejetted quadrajet carb, and a recurved distributor could wake it up dramatically, turning the long-roofed Olds into a legitimately quick machine for the era. Stylistically, the '83 Custom Cruiser was very much of its time. Squared-off lines, chrome bumpers, and the kind of boxy elegance that was slowly fading off as the decade wore on. Inside, it was all plush Oldsmobile luxury, soft velour or leather seats, thick carpeting, wood grain trim, and enough room to hold not just a family, but half their neighborhood. It wasn't meant to be flashy, and that was precisely the point. No one expected a massive wood-sided Oldsmobile wagon to leave rubber at a stoplight, which is exactly why those who owned the 403-equipped models loved them so much. Police and tow package buyers especially prized the 403's torque since it could pull trailers, boats, or just about anything without breaking a sweat. Fleet mechanics would often quietly tune them up, knowing that the 403 was happiest when it could breathe, and those tuned wagons became legends in small towns where people swore the sheriff's family car was faster than most coupes. Even as the rest of Detroit transitioned to smaller V6s and smog-choked small blocks, the Custom Cruiser held on to its big V8 identity a little longer, making it one of the last of the true full-size American wagons with real power under the hood. Today, the 1983 Oldsmobile Custom Cruiser 403 is remembered fondly by those who had them. Survivors are often discovered with high miles and stories to tell, having served as family workhorses for decades. But enthusiasts who uncover one know just how special it is. A last gasp of old-school V8 torque in an era where most wagons had gone soft. It wasn't about quarter-mile glory, though with a few tweaks, it could get dangerously close. It was about the thrill of knowing that a car built to haul kids, camping gear, and groceries could also surprise a Camaro at a stoplight. It was the definition of a hidden muscle wagon, quiet, massive, luxurious, and underestimated, yet able to bare its teeth when pushed. A car that proved muscle didn't always come in coupe form, and that even in the dark days of the early '80s, the right wagon could still put a grin on your face. Would you like me to expand this into a more nostalgic owner's narrative, maybe from the perspective of a dad in the '80s who quietly enjoyed dusting off sportier cars while hauling his family around in a 403 Custom Cruiser? That would really bring out its sleeper charm.
The 1967 Ford Fairlane Squire Wagon 390 GT is one of those rare machines that makes you smile at the sheer audacity of Detroit in the 1960s. Here was a family station wagon, complete with simulated wood paneling down the flanks, chrome roof racks, 3 rows of seating, and enough space to haul half the neighborhood to a ball game. And yet, under the hood lurked the same high-performance V8 that powered the Fairlane GT coupes and even found its way into early Mustang GTs. Ford's 390 cubic inch FE Series V8 with a 4-barrel carburetor produced a stout 325 horsepower and more than enough torque to launch this wagon from a stoplight with a bark of the rear tires. Even more incredible, buyers could spec it with a 4-speed manual transmission, turning a seemingly mild-mannered Squire into a genuine stoplight brawler that could go fender to fender with GTOs, Chargers, or Camaros. The Fairlane itself was already Ford's mid-size muscle contender, bridging the gap between the compact Mustang and the full-size Galaxy. When Ford offered the GT package in wagon form, it wasn't marketed loudly. It was the kind of option hidden in order sheets that savvy buyers or performance-minded dads discovered. The Squire trim, with its faux wood cladding and upscale interior, was meant to be the stylish family hauler. But pair it with the 390 GT, and you had a wagon that lived a double life. At the grocery store, it looked like just another suburban family car. At a stoplight, it was capable of dusting off unsuspecting muscle coops that underestimated the long roof Ford. Owners who had these wagons often talk about the shock factor. One enthusiast recalled borrowing his father's 390 GT Squire in the late 1960s to cruise Main Street. Stripped of hubcaps and running slightly wider tires, the car looked like a family hauler on the outside, but he remembered the thrill of pulling up next to a new Camaro RS SS, rowing the 4-speed, and watching disbelief spread across the other driver's face as the big wagon pulled ahead. Another owner later said, "It was the ultimate contradiction. My wife used it for groceries, but I could take it to the drag strip and run mid-14s with the kids' baseball gear still in the back." The driving experience was unlike any other wagon of the period. The 390 GT was no small block. It had a deep, throaty exhaust note, endless torque off idle, and the kind of mid-range surge that made highway passing effortless. With the optional 4-speed manual and Hurst shifter, you had genuine muscle car engagement in a package that could also haul plywood sheets from the hardware store. The Fairlane chassis, being lighter and more compact than a full-size Galaxy, gave the wagon decent handling for its day, though the heavy front end of the FE motor kept things honest in corners. Straight-line blasts, however, were where the 390 GT Squire truly shined. Stylistically, the '67 Fairlane Squire captured the height of the wood-paneled wagon era. It had clean mid-size proportions, stacked quad headlights, sharp body lines, and the distinctive faux wood siding that shouted suburban respectability. Inside, buyers got bench seats or optional buckets, a dash similar to the GT Coupe, and enough cargo room to rival a pickup. For families who wanted one car that could do it all, school runs, family vacations, cross-country road trips, and still keep up with the local street racers, the 390 Squire was the answer. Today, the 1967 Fairlane Squire Wagon 390 GT is almost mythical. So few were ordered with the performance engine and 4-speed that survivors are prized among collectors who understand just how unique they are. Most wagons of the era were ordered with 6 cylinders or mild small block V8s, making the big block GT versions incredibly rare. When one pops up at an auction, it tends to draw attention from both muscle car enthusiasts and wagon lovers alike, because it represents a perfect what-if car. What if a grocery getter was secretly a muscle machine? In many ways, the Fairlane Squire 390 GT symbolizes the best of 1960s Detroit. Bold, impractical, a little absurd, and totally wonderful. It proved that muscle could be wrapped in wood paneling and that a family wagon could roar down the quarter mile with the best of them. It was proof that in the golden age of horsepower, even the most domestic body style could be transformed into a performance legend if you checked the right boxes on the order sheet. Would you like me to make the next wagon story even longer and more nostalgic, with a detailed owner-style perspective, like someone recalling a family road trip where the Squire's muscle side unexpectedly came out?
The 1966 AMC Rambler Classic Cross-Country 327 V8 is a fascinating and often overlooked chapter in the history of muscle wagons. While American Motors never had the brand cachet of GM, Ford, or Chrysler when it came to high-performance cars, the Rambler Classic wagon with the 327 V8 quietly proved that you didn't need fins, chrome, or massive dimensions to deliver muscle. In fact, the relatively lightweight AMC wagon, combined with a high-output V8, made for a vehicle that was surprisingly quick, nimble for its size, and capable of outperforming more celebrated muscle coupes under the right circumstances. The engine at the heart of the sleeper was AMC's 327 cubic inch V8, producing around 270 to 275 horsepower in top performance trim. It wasn't the largest displacement of the era, but its power-to-weight ratio in the Rambler Classic cross-country wagon was impressive. Unlike GM and Mopar wagons that could weigh well over 4,000 pounds, the Rambler was comparatively svelte, tipping the scales closer to 3,400 to 3,500 pounds. This made acceleration and cornering much livelier than anyone expecting the lumbering demeanor of a station wagon might imagine. Low-end torque allowed for brisk takeoffs, and with a manual or even automatic transmission, the Rambler could launch from a stoplight or merge onto highways with authority. Street racers and casual enthusiasts alike found themselves surprised when a wood-paneled, three-row Rambler suddenly outpaced a Mustang or Camaro in a pinch. One owner remembered, "I lined up against the '66 Mustang GT once. He laughed when he saw my wagon, but by the time we hit the first quarter mile, I was well ahead. People didn't believe it until they saw the tape." The cross-country wagon itself was pure 1960s AMC. Clean, functional, and a little understated, with squared-off lines, modest chrome trim, and practical roof rails for hauling cargo. Inside, it could seat 6 comfortably, and the rear cargo area was enormous, giving the impression of a family-friendly hauler with no thought toward performance. But AMC's engineers had built a solid chassis and installed heavy-duty suspension components that allowed the 327-equipped wagons to handle surprisingly well for a full-size vehicle of the era. Coupled with the lightweight body, it made for an effective combination, a wagon that could corner respectably, hold its composure at speed, and still make a strong showing on the street or the occasional drag strip. Owners often joked about the look of disbelief on other drivers' faces as a compact-looking wagon with wood-grain trim suddenly outpaced a fastback Mustang or Camaro. The Rambler 327 wagons were also a statement of practicality meeting performance. While GM and Mopar were still offering larger wagons with immense torque, AMC's approach was more subtle, a smaller footprint, less weight, but a powerful engine tucked under the hood. It was a car for buyers who wanted utility without sacrificing fun. A vehicle that could ferry children to school, carry luggage for a weekend getaway, and still let Dad enjoy a spirited blast down a country road or an unexpected stoplight challenge. Owners often joked about the look of disbelief on other drivers' faces as a compact-looking wagon with wood-grain trim quietly outperformed their fastback Mustang or Camaro. Today, surviving 1966 AMC Rambler Classic cross-country wagons with the 327 V8 are rare and highly prized among enthusiasts who understand the paradox of AMC's muscle efforts. These wagons weren't produced in huge numbers, and their understated nature meant that many were overlooked at the time. Collectors loved them not only for their rarity, but for the story they tell, that muscle didn't always come with fins, bling, or a big block badge, and that AMC Motors quietly proved it could build a fast, practical wagon when it chose to. Driving one today is still a revelation. The engine's torque, the wagon's relatively low weight, and the solid-feeling suspension give it a responsiveness that surprises even seasoned vintage car drivers. In many ways, it embodies the spirit of the 1960s muscle era, but with a twist. Understated, clever, and practical, yet utterly capable. The 1966 AMC Rambler Classic Cross-Country 327 V8 is proof that speed can hide in unexpected places and that the muscle wagon story wasn't limited to the big three.
The 1959 Mercury Colony Park Marauder 430 is a perfect example of the late 50s Detroit philosophy of doing everything bigger, bolder, and more powerful, and it occupies a special place in the history of American muscle wagons. Mercury's Colony Park wagons were already among the most luxurious and stylish on the market, adorned with sweeping wood-grain trim, gleaming chrome accents, and those unmistakable tail fins that defined the era. But when Mercury offered the Marauder 430 V8 option in the Colony Park, the station wagon suddenly transformed from a stately family cruiser into a rolling powerhouse. A car that, at a glance, looked like a suburban chariot, but could reach speeds and deliver acceleration that few drivers of the period would have expected from a family-oriented vehicle. The 430 cubic inch Mel V8 was a masterpiece of late 50s American engineering. With a single 4-barrel carburetor in stock form, producing roughly 360 horsepower and a massive 475 pound-feet of torque, it was designed to move Mercury's full-size cars with authority. In the Colony Park wagon, this translated into astonishing acceleration for such a large vehicle. The Marauder 430 had no problem merging onto highways, overtaking slower traffic, or maintaining speed over long stretches. Tasks that, at the time, would have made ordinary station wagons feel lethargic or unsafe. One contemporary owner recalled, "People used to gape when I'd hit the gas on the freeway. They expected a family wagon to lumber along, but the Colony Park would surge forward like a road rocket." Kids in the back? No problem. Adrenaline in the driver's veins? Absolutely. Part of the charm of the Colony Park Marauder was the perfect balance between style and performance. Mercury had outfitted the wagon with luxurious interiors, plush bench seats, thick carpeting, dual-tone vinyl and cloth upholstery, and a dash full of chrome detailing and wood accents, so the car felt every bit like a first-class cruiser. Yet beneath this refined exterior lurked a V8 with enough muscle to shock nearly any two-door coupe on the road. The long wheelbase chassis handled the Marauder's weight with surprising composure, aided by a suspension designed to keep the ride smooth without compromising control at higher speeds. On the open highway, it was a rare combination: comfort, space, and terrifyingly usable power. The Marauder 430 Colony Park was also a car of social contradictions. Outwardly, it signaled prosperity and family duty. The wood-paneled sides screamed suburban refinement, and the vast cargo area could accommodate luggage, groceries, or sporting equipment with ease. But anyone who glimpsed the driver's right foot or heard the engine's deep burble quickly realized this was not just a grocery getter, it was a sleeper with teeth. Stories abound of Mercury owners pulling onto highways and leaving stunned observers in smaller sports cars, only to return home and carry children and picnic baskets as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. From a collector's perspective, the 1959 Marauder 430 Colony Park is exceedingly rare. While the Colony Park wagons were popular for their luxury and style, very few were ever ordered with the Marauder 430 option, making surviving examples a treasure for enthusiasts. Today, these wagons are sought after not only for their classic late 50s design and wood-paneled elegance, but for the sheer audacity of a car that combined first-class comfort with raw, highway-ready performance. The juxtaposition of style and speed is almost laughable. An enormous, gleaming, finned wagon capable of terrifying acceleration. But that's precisely what makes it unforgettable. Driving a Marauder 430 today, even at modest speeds, evokes a sense of historical thrill. The low rumble of the Mel V8, the commanding seating position, and the dramatic sweep of the fins all remind you that this was an era when American manufacturers weren't afraid to give a family wagon the heart of a muscle car. It represents an intersection of luxury, performance, and audacity that few vehicles then or now have ever matched. The 1959 Mercury Colony Park Marauder 430 is not just a station wagon, it's a statement that American muscle could exist in the most unlikely of packages, and that even a family cruiser could inspire awe, respect, and perhaps a little fear on the open road. If you want, I can expand this into a fully immersive story, imagining a day in the life of a 1959 Marauder 430 Colony Park owner taking the kids to a weekend getaway, only to leave an unsuspecting Thunderbird in the rearview mirror, really emphasizing the absurdity and thrill of a muscle wagon in the late 50s. The 1972 Plymouth Satellite Wagon 400-440 is one of those legendary examples of Mopar's unapologetic muscle philosophy slipping into a family-friendly package. On the outside, it wore the familiar long, angular lines of early 70s Chrysler wagons: wood grain siding, chrome trim, sweeping roofline, and enough space to carry the entire neighborhood's sports gear and groceries. It looked comfortable, practical, and completely benign, a quintessential suburban family hauler. But underneath that faux domestic exterior lay the heart of a street terror. Buyers could spec the Satellite wagon with Mopar's most potent engines of the era, the 400 or the 440 big block V8, turning an everyday wagon into a rolling torque monster capable of humiliating sport coupes and muscle cars alike. The 400 and 440 engines were nothing to joke about. The 400, in high-performance trim, produced around 340-350 horsepower, while the 440, especially when fitted with the Magnum package, could push 375 or even horsepower in excess, depending on the options.
More crucially, these big blocks delivered monstrous low-end torque that allowed the hefty Satellite wagon to launch aggressively from a stoplight or move effortlessly with a fully loaded cargo bay. Even with the extra mass and suburban-focused suspension, these engines made the Satellite feel like a lightweight dragster compared to its appearance. Owners who dared to drive one often spoke of the shocked expressions of Camaro, Firebird, or Mustang drivers when the long wood-paneled wagon roared past with surprising authority. One longtime Mopar enthusiast remembered, "You'd park it next to a Z28, and the kid behind the wheel would laugh. A second later, he'd be staring at your taillights, wondering what just hit him." The driving dynamics were a study in contrasts. The wagon's long wheelbase and soft suspension offered a comfortable, almost floating ride at highway speeds, while the big block engines made throttle inputs feel like pure, controllable power. Steering required attention, brakes were nothing short of massive for the era, and body roll was a natural consequence of the size. But all of that was part of the fun. On wide-open roads or quarter-mile straights, the Satellite wagon felt like it was alive, with the 400 or 440 pulling so hard that it seemed impossible for a car so obviously practical to move that fast. Owners often noted that when tuned with freer-flowing exhaust and minor carburetor tweaks, these wagons could run times comparable to serious muscle coupes, all while maintaining the ability to carry a full family and luggage. Stylistically, the 72 Satellite wagon exuded early 70s Mopar charm. The long roofline, prominent grille, angular headlights, and optional wood grain cladding gave it an air of respectable suburban authority. Inside, the car offered roomy seating, generous cargo capacity, and the kind of upholstery and trim that made road trips and family errands comfortable and stylish. Yet, for those who knew better, every element of the wagon, the engine bay's cavernous capacity, the wide stance, the beefy rear axle, hinted at the secret lurking power. It was the ultimate sleeper, an inconspicuous family car with enough performance to terrify even serious street racers. The rarity of 400/440 equipped Satellite wagons adds to their mystique. Most buyers went for 6-cylinder or small block engines, so the number of high-performance wagons leaving the factory was extremely limited. Survivors today are prized by collectors not just for their engine options, but for the sheer audacity of what Plymouth allowed. A car that looked like it belonged in a suburban driveway, but could leave a Mustang or Camaro wondering what just passed. The Satellite wagon represents a unique era in American automotive history, when power and practicality could coexist, if only briefly, before insurance, fuel crises, and emissions began to rein in Detroit's more adventurous side. Driving one of these today, even gently, evokes the sense of contrast that makes muscle wagons so special. The polished wood grain, spacious interior, and long lines invite family duty, but the growl of the 400 or 440, the torque surge off idle, and the way it handles highway speeds remind you that this is not a car to underestimate. The 1972 Plymouth Satellite Wagon 400/440 is a perfect example of the sleeper muscle car formula, a car that could ferry children to soccer practice 1 minute and embarrass muscle coupes the next. It's the kind of audacious creation that only Mopar could have produced, a true hidden weapon disguised in suburban luxury.
The 1966 AMC Rambler Classic Cross-Country 327 V8 is a fascinating and often overlooked chapter in the history of muscle wagons. While American Motors never had the brand cachet of GM, Ford, or Chrysler when it came to high-performance cars, the Rambler Classic wagon, with the 327 V8, quietly proved that you didn't need fins, chrome, or massive dimensions to deliver muscle. In fact, the relatively lightweight AMC wagon, combined with a high-output V8, made for a vehicle that was surprisingly quick, nimble for its size, and capable of outperforming more celebrated muscle coupes under the right circumstances. The engine at the heart of this sleeper was AMC's 327 cubic inch V8, producing around 270 to 275 horsepower in top performance trim. It wasn't the largest displacement of the era, but its power-to-weight ratio in the Rambler Classic cross-country wagon was impressive.
Unlike GM and Mopar wagons that could weigh well over 4,000 pounds, the Rambler was comparatively svelte, tipping the scales closer to 3,500 pounds. This made acceleration and cornering much livelier than anyone expecting the lumbering demeanor of a station wagon might imagine. Low-end torque allowed for brisk takeoffs, and with a manual or even automatic transmission, the Rambler could launch from a stoplight or merge onto highways with authority. Street racers and casual enthusiasts alike found themselves surprised when a wood-paneled, three-row Rambler suddenly outpaced a Mustang or Camaro in a pinch. One owner remembered, "I lined up against a '66 Mustang GT once. He laughed when he saw my wagon, but by the time we hit the first quarter mile, I was well ahead. People didn't believe it until they saw the tape." The cross-country wagon itself was pure mid-60s AMC. Clean, functional, and a little understated, with squared-off lines, modest chrome trim, and practical roof rails for hauling cargo. Inside, it could seat 6 comfortably, and the rear cargo area was enormous, giving the impression of a family-friendly hauler with no thought towards performance. But AMC's engineers had built a solid chassis and installed heavy-duty suspension components that allowed the 327-equipped wagons to handle surprisingly well for a full-size vehicle of the era. Coupled with the lightweight body, it made for an effective combination. A wagon that could corner respectably, hold its composure at speed, and still make a strong showing on the street or the occasional drag strip. Owners often joked about the look of disbelief on other drivers' faces, as a compact-looking wagon with wood-grain trim quietly outperformed their fastback Mustang or Camaro. The Rambler 327 wagons were also a statement of practicality meeting performance. While GM and Mopar were still offering larger wagons with immense torque, AMC's approach was more subtle. A smaller footprint, less weight, but a powerful engine tucked under the hood. It was a car for buyers who wanted utility without sacrificing fun. A vehicle that could ferry children to school, carry luggage for a weekend getaway, and still let Dad enjoy a spirited blast down a country road or an unexpected stoplight challenge. Today, surviving 1966 AMC Rambler Classic cross-country 327 V8 wagons are rare and highly prized among enthusiasts who understand the paradox of AMC's muscle efforts. These wagons weren't produced in huge numbers, and their understated nature meant that many were overlooked at the time. Collectors loved them not only for their rarity, but for the story they tell. That muscle didn't always come with thins, bling, or a big block badge, and that American Motors quietly proved it could build a fast, practical wagon when it chose to. Driving one today is still a revelation. The engine's torque, the wagon's relatively low weight, and the solid-feeling suspension give it a responsiveness that surprises even seasoned vintage car drivers. In many ways, it embodies the spirit of the 1960s muscle era, but with a twist. Understated, clever, and practical, yet utterly capable. The 1966 AMC Rambler Classic Cross-Country 327 V8 is proof that speed can hide in unexpected places, and that the muscle wagon story wasn't limited to the big three.
The 1971 Ford Torino Wagon Cobra Jet is one of those rare, almost mythical machines that perfectly captures the audacity of Detroit's golden muscle era, spilling into the world of family wagons. By 1971, Ford had cemented the Torino Cobra's reputation as a legitimate muscle car contender, a coupe capable of competing with GTOs, Chevelles, and the other top-tier street racers of the time. Yet, hidden deep within the factory order sheets, a small group of buyers discovered the almost unbelievable option to equip the wagon version of the Torino with the legendary 429 Cobra Jet Big Block. This wasn't just a performance option, it was a direct challenge to every conventional notion of what a station wagon could do. Here was a vehicle with all the size, luxury, and practicality of a suburban family car, but with enough firepower under the hood to make a seasoned muscle car driver nervous. Under the hood, the heart of the machine was the 429 Cobra Jet, a true beast of the Ford Big Block family. Rated conservatively at 370 horsepower, the engine's real strength lay in its torque, which was immense and immediate. The long-armed torque curve meant that even a wagon weighing over 4,300 pounds could leave lighter coupes struggling at the first hint of throttle. With a high-output 4-barrel carburetor, aggressive camshaft, and reinforced internals, the 429 was designed to perform in Ford's high-speed muscle packages and proved equally capable in the wagon. Owners who drove these wagons often described the sensation as almost surreal. The long, wood-paneled body lurches forward like a freight train, while the engine emits a low, rumbling growl that announces its intentions to the world. People didn't believe it, one owner recalled. They'd see a family wagon at the stoplight, laugh, and then I'd bury the throttle. The tires would squeal, and in seconds they'd be staring at my taillights, wondering what just happened. Driving the Torino wagon Cobra Jet was an exercise in controlled chaos. The car's long wheelbase and substantial weight gave it a composed, commanding presence on the road, while the massive engine provided a visceral, almost primal surge of power whenever the accelerator was pressed. The suspension, upgraded with heavy-duty components and optional performance packages, helped tame the ride, but the reality remained. This was not a car to corner carelessly. Yet for straight-line performance, it was a revelation. Even fully loaded with passengers and cargo, the wagon could accelerate as aggressively as many of its coupe counterparts, making it a true sleeper of the era. Some owners reported mid-13-second quarter-mile times when tuned, and highway poles were simply terrifying for anyone in conventional vehicles. The interior of the Torino wagon Cobra Jet was deceptively ordinary, yet thoughtfully designed for family use. Bench seating could comfortably hold 6 adults. The cargo area swallowed luggage, sporting equipment, and groceries with ease, and the optional wood grain trim gave it a suburban veneer. Yet beneath the veneer, every drive carried the thrill of raw performance. Imagine a father taking the kids to a weekend camping trip, luggage packed in the back, children playing quietly, perhaps the mother chatting in the passenger seat, and then the father casually stomping the accelerator on an empty country road, the tires screaming, the wagon surging forward with all the authority of a dedicated muscle coupe. The surreal juxtaposition of family practicality and muscle car ferocity made the 429-equipped wagon one of the most memorable vehicles ever produced in Detroit. Stylistically, the 71 Torino wagon embodied early 70s Ford design at its most muscular. Long roof lines, squared-off body panels, a wide grille, and wood-grain sides suggested practicality and suburban sensibility, but there was a certain menace in the subtle lines, the stance, and the weight of the rear axle. This allowed the wagon to masquerade as a benign family car while quietly holding the potential to dominate street races and drag strips. Stories abound of drivers lining up next to Mustangs, Camaros, or Chevelles, confident in their speed advantage, only to be stunned seconds later when the wagon pulled effortlessly ahead, the 429's torque delivering a shockwave of acceleration that seemed impossible given the car's size. Rarity only amplifies the legend of the Torino wagon Cobra Jet. Few were produced, as most buyers were content with 6-cylinder or small block options. Those who managed to order the big block wagon were either enthusiasts with foresight, dealers catering to collectors, or performance-minded buyers who wanted to blend family utility with unrestrained speed. Today, surviving examples are prized not only for their performance capabilities, but for the sheer audacity of their concept. A wagon with the soul of a dragster, hiding in plain sight in suburban driveways and family garages. In essence, the 1971 Ford Torino wagon Cobra Jet is a monument to the most daring period in Detroit's automotive history. It is a machine of contradictions, luxurious yet brutal, practical yet terrifyingly fast, a family hauler that could humiliate dedicated muscle coupes. It perfectly embodies the concept of the muscle wagon, a fleeting chapter in American automotive culture when manufacturers were willing to push the boundaries of common sense and practicality. For those lucky enough to drive or own one, it is not just a car, it is an experience, a thrill, and a story. A reminder that sometimes the most outrageous performance could be hidden behind a veneer of suburban respectability. If you want, I can expand this further into a fully immersive narrative, imagining a summer weekend trip where the wagon is loaded with a family and gear, yet when the father hits a country road, it roars down the asphalt, leaving a line of astonished street racers in its wake, really bringing to life the absurdity, power, and thrill of the 429 Cobra Jet Torino wagon.